Obviously, the cornerstone of Jewish life is the Torah. Last week, at the beginning of the Torah reading, the same word was used 3 times. Vayomer, Amor, and Amarta. And Rashi asks, why was this word repeated? We have to learn something from every extra word, and every word written says something and also does not say something else and is very precise, and maybe that's why we have so many lawyers who are Jews. And moreover, Marta Rashi says, Lahazir Hagedolim Alaktanim. So the older Kohanim, the older of the priestly caste, will admonish those who are younger and teach them the proper way. The Rebbe teaches, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, Lahaz here doesn't just mean to admonish, but it comes from the word brighten, like the word Zohar. And the idea is that when we educate, we have to illuminate, not just admonish, because then it's more effective. This week we read about Bahar. Bahar is the mountain. And the mountain is where you get a greater view. But I also like to say that the mountain is from where a nation gets governed. You have the extremists here on the sides, and as people become more moderate, they rise in prominence till the most prominent people are the ones towards the center. They can hear people from all sides. All sides can hear them. The people shouting on one side of the mountain or all the way on the other are heard by almost nobody. And it also allows you to get a bigger view of the future. Standing only in an echo chamber where you are doesn't give you a reflection of any views but your own. So I think that those 2 bookends, last week's Torah reading and this week's Torah reading, show us Lahazir Hagedolim Alakatanim, not just that the older shall admonish the younger, but we look into the big picture issues and then we bring them down into the smaller, minute details. So when I am here, which I believe I've been here every single time since it started. Next year will be the 20th one, God willing. But when I see sitting to my right someone as iconic in our community as Malcolm Hoenlein, who knows me, by the way, longer than he knows anyone in this room, including his family, his wife and kids, because he knew me when I was born. Our block in Northeast Philadelphia, Griffith Street, bore 2 great iconic personalities. One was Malcolm Hoenlein, the other one was the general manager of the Phillies, Reuben Amaro Jr. And I can't say Lahavdil because he's Jewish. But Malcolm also has a very significant and close relationship to our family, because just as he spoke about rebuilding Judaism and not being afraid, it was not too long after the Holocaust where his parents, who were already in America, helped to rebuild Jewish life in our city. And his mother, Mrs. Hoenlein, the revered Mrs. Hoenlein, was a very highly regarded teacher and taught every one of the children in my family, except me, I was in a different class, but all my brothers and my sister learned how to read Hebrew from Mrs. Hoenlein, as did thousands of other children in Philadelphia. Now, when Malcolm says that we have to be sure that our parents and our grandparents look down on us and are proud, I know how proud Malcolm's mother is of him, because I remember her sitting in my mother's living room and regaling her with all the stories of his exploits. First, he was a huge student activist at Temple University. Then he did the Philadelphia JCRC. So we know Malcolm, as I like to use this term on the Hill, since it was a big deal that he knew us. But then he went to New York, to the JCRC, and to the Conference of Presidents, and the rest is literally history. I just want to say one thing about the one who introduced him, William, is that Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of Our Sages, says, Loi ha-baishon loimed, someone who is bashful will never learn, v'loi ha-kapdon melamed, somebody who is too particular will never be able to teach. Right? That's why Malcolm's mother was such a great teacher, because even if I wasn't in her class, the whole school knew of her great nature. Transition in major organizations, especially Jewish ones, is a very tricky thing. And too often does not work out so well, to the detriment of the constituency. The Conference of Presidents, I think, is a shining example of a much better way. Because instead of having someone who serves at the helm for decades and then has a successor who's nice to him for a month and then the two never meet again, what we're seeing at the top of the Conference of Presidents today is a partnership, a mentorship. What we say, dor ledor yishabach ma'asecha, we talk about praising God from generation to generation. When it's a quick split, there's so much of administrative and institutional memory that's lost. Malcolm taking the time and making the effort, and William also taking the time and making the effort, so that the transition of leadership in the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations at this, the most trying time that I can remember in my own life, is a very, very important thing. Malcolm was talking about on campus how the students protesting against Israel are so ignorant. One of the worst campuses was George Washington University, right near here. And it's a campus on which we're very active. Chabad has a very significant presence. And I was at the encampment every day or two, just so I could see for myself what was happening, because people here on the Hill wanted to know. And they actually came to GW, and soon thereafter the encampment was gone. One of them had to summon the mayor to the Hill, but that's a whole long story for another time. And I was listening in on some of the conversations on the street there, and I hear the following. Just so that you wouldn't possibly know the person in question, I hear the following. Hey, Stacy, what are you doing here? I didn't know you were into this stuff. She said, I don't know, something about genocide in a river or whatever. She says, you're like against Israel? She goes, no, I signed up for Code Pink like 2 years ago, and I just got a text on the network, get over here, they're serving shawarma. That's who's demonstrating against Israel. When they cleaned out the encampment, there were 12 out of hundreds. There were 12 GW students there. So ignorance is at the core of a lot of this mess, is ignorance and manipulation. So people like Malcolm, who stood up against these bigots back when they weren't nearly as big as they are now, back in Philadelphia and then in New York, and then on behalf of the American Jewish community and around the world in places we all go to today, but people wouldn't venture to many years ago, speaks very, very loudly. So I'm just a humble, younger neighbor of his, a student of his mother, but I could say as my closing line, first of all, thank you to Ezra and to Mrs. Friedlander for putting this together every year. But the highest compliment I can say is that Mr. and Mrs. Hoenlein Sr., even though they've left this world, they're Aleichem HaSholem, they're on high. We have no doubt, Malcolm, that they continue to be very, very proud of you. Hashem is proud of you. The Jewish people still need you for as long as God will give you koyach. And may you continue to do this work for a very, very long time. Mr. Gertler, I don't know you, but I've heard a lot about you. And if even half of it is true, it was worth it everybody coming here together to pay you some tribute. Thank you.